The perfect facade. The crystal ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel sparkled under 1,000 chandelier lights as Silicon Valley's elite gathered for the annual Tech Visionary Awards. At the center of it all stood Marcus Sterling, resplendent in his custom Italian tuxedo, basking in the glow of adulation as he accepted the Entrepreneur of the Decade award. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice boomed across the packed ballroom. 12 years ago, I had nothing but a laptop, a dream, and the audacity to believe I could revolutionize data management. Today, Sterling Innovations employs over 8,000 people and processes information for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Cameras flashed as Marcus raised the gleaming trophy, his smile practiced and perfect. Behind him on the massive screen, Sterling Innovations' meteoric rise was displayed in glowing graphics, from a garage startup to a $3 billion empire. Standing gracefully at the edge of the stage was Victoria Sterling, Marcus's wife. Of 12 years, she wore an understated midnight blue gown that complemented her auburn hair, swept into an elegant chignon. Her smile was warm and supportive, the picture of a devoted spouse celebrating her husband's triumph. To everyone watching, she was the perfect corporate wife, beautiful, refined, and content to stand in his shadow. But those who looked closely might have noticed the sharpness in Victoria's green eyes, the way she tracked every word of Marcus's speech with the precision of someone who understood every technical detail he mentioned. They might have caught the almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes when he spoke of sacrificing everything to build his vision. After the ceremony, as they mingled with investors and tech moguls, Victoria played her role flawlessly. She made charming small talk with board members' wives, graciously accepted compliments about the charity gala she had organized, and deflected personal questions with practiced ease. But she also listened intently to conversations about market, trends, emerging technologies, and acquisition opportunities. It was past midnight when they finally returned to their Marin County estate. The sprawling modern home overlooked the bay, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the distant city lights. Marcus loosened his bow tie, still riding high on the evening's praise. "Did you see Patterson's face when I announced the quantum computing division?" Marcus chuckled, pouring himself a scotch. He had no idea we were that far ahead of cloud tech. Victoria slipped off her heels, her movements graceful and deliberate. "It was a wonderful evening," she said softly. "Everyone was so impressed." Marcus turned to face her, and something in his expression made her stomach clench. The triumphant glow was fading, replaced by something harder, more distant. "Victoria, we need to talk." She had known this moment was coming. The signs had been obvious for months: the late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the way Natasha Vale, his brilliant marketing director, seemed to anticipate his every need with an intimacy that went far beyond professional duty. "I want a divorce," Marcus said, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Victoria's expression didn't change. She simply nodded once, her composure unshakable. Her calm reaction unnerved him more than tears would have. The architect's blueprint Victoria retreated to her private study, a sanctuary Marcus rarely entered. Surrounded by first-edition books and her grandmother's antique desk, she opened a locked drawer and withdrew a leather portfolio, one that contained the real story of Sterling Innovations. The memory came flooding back. Marcus, in 2012, passionate and broke, pacing their tiny apartment after his third venture capital rejection. "They don't understand the vision, Vic," he had raged. "I need $8 million for the server infrastructure, but they want 60% equity. I'd rather fail than give away my company." Victoria had said nothing that night, but the next morning she made a call to Garrett Blackwood, the discreet financial advisor who had managed her family's wealth since her parents' death. Her inheritance from the Sterling shipping fortune, ironically, Sharing Marcus's chosen surname was substantial but carefully hidden in offshore trusts. "I need to create an investment vehicle," she had told Garrett. "Something completely untraceable to me." Within a week, Meridian Holdings appeared on Marcus's radar, a mysterious venture capital firm interested in data management startups. The $8 million check arrived with minimal due diligence, and Marcus had been ecstatic. "They barely asked any questions," he had marveled. "They just recognized genius when they saw it." Victoria smiled bitterly at the memory. She had structured the deal herself, ensuring Marcus retained operational control while Meridian held non-voting, preferred shares. She had been protecting his ego even then. The pattern continued for years. When Sterling Innovations needed $15 million for AI research, Phoenix Capital materialized. When international expansion required $22 million, Apex Ventures appeared. Each time, Marcus celebrated these anonymous benefactors who believed in his vision. Each time, Victoria had been the silent architect of his success. She had told herself it was an investment in their future together, that eventually, when the company was secure, she would reveal the truth, and they would laugh about her elaborate deception. Marcus would be grateful, she had believed, proud of her cleverness and devotion, but success had changed him. The hungry entrepreneur became an arrogant CEO who started believing his own mythology. The man who once valued her input on everything began treating her like an ornament. The partner became a possession. Now, as Victoria spread the financial documents across her desk, each one felt like evidence of her own naivety. Garrett had warned her years ago about the emotional risks of secret partnerships. "Money hidden is trust compromised," he had said. She should have listened. Her phone buzzed. Helena Cross, the forensic accountant Garrett had recommended, was already at work. "Victoria, I've traced the first 3 shell companies." Helena's voice was crisp and professional. "The paper trail is meticulous. Every transaction, every board resolution, every loan agreement, it's all documented. Marcus may have been the face of the company, but legally, you've been the power behind the throne." Victoria felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. She had built an empire in the shadows, and now she would have to step into the light to claim it. "How long before we have everything compiled?" she asked. 2 weeks for a complete audit. "But Victoria," Helena's voice carried a warning, "when this comes out, it's going to destroy him. Are you prepared for that?" Victoria looked out at the bay, where the first hints of dawn were touching the water. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was probably with Natasha, planning their future with money that was never truly his. "He destroyed us first," she said quietly. "I'm just collecting what was always mine." Part 3. The paper trail. Marcus Sterling sat across from Preston Kane in the lawyer's imposing corner office, confidence radiating from every pore. Kane was the most expensive divorce attorney in the city, known for his scorched-earth tactics and his ability to minimize settlements for wealthy husbands. "This should be straightforward," Kane said, sliding a document across the mahogany table. "You founded Sterling Innovations before the marriage. The company's growth is entirely due to your efforts. We'll offer her $10 million. Generous for someone who contributed nothing but domestic support." Marcus nodded approvingly. $10 million sounded like a fortune, but it was pocket change compared to his $3 billion empire. Victoria was never involved in the business side. She organized charity events and dinner parties. Important for networking, sure, but hardly worth half my company. Kane's smile was predatory. "Exactly. We'll paint a clear picture. Brilliant entrepreneur, supportive but non-contributing spouse. The courts love simple narratives." Meanwhile, across town in Helena Cross's cramped but efficient office, a very different story was emerging. Financial documents covered every surface: bank transfers, incorporation papers, loan agreements, and board resolutions spanning 12 years. Helena worked with the focused intensity of an archaeologist uncovering an ancient civilization. "Look at this," Helena said, pointing to a wire transfer dated March 15, 2013. Meridian Holdings deposits $8 million into Sterling Innovations account. The money originated from First National Bank of the Cayman Islands. Victoria studied the document she had seen countless times before, but now with fresh eyes. "Meridian was my first shell company. I needed the servers for the data processing expansion. And here," Helena continued, pulling out another file, "Phoenix Capital provides $15 million in 2015. Same bank, same ultimate source. The AI research division that made Sterling Innovations a household name, your money." The evidence was overwhelming. Every major milestone in Sterling Innovations' history could be traced back to Victoria's hidden investments. The angel investors Marcus celebrated in interviews were all fictional entities, fronts for Victoria's carefully orchestrated financial support. Helena's assistant James called out from his computer terminal, "I've cracked the Apex Ventures Incorporation, filed in Delaware, dissolved 6 months after the international expansion funding. No physical address, no employees except a registered agent. 22 million that time," Victoria murmured. Marcus was so excited about the European offices. He called it his conquest of the old world. But it wasn't just about the money. Helena had uncovered something more damaging: control structures that proved Victoria wasn't merely an investor, but a shadow board member. Her shell companies held preferred shares with protective covenants that prevented Marcus from making major decisions without approval he unknowingly received. Because Victoria, through her proxies, had been protecting him from his own impulsive nature. "This loan agreement from 2017, Helena said, her voice rising with excitement, includes a clause preventing the company from taking on debt exceeding $10 million without Meridian Holdings' consent." Marcus signed it, but look at the signature. "Witness?" Victoria leaned forward. The witness signature belonged to Natasha Vale, the same woman who was now sleeping with Marcus. The irony was almost poetic. By the end of the week, Helena had compiled a devastating portfolio of evidence. 68 separate transactions totaling $127 million had flowed from Victoria's trusts into Sterling Innovations over 12 years. More importantly, the legal structures showed that Victoria held controlling interest in the company through her shell companies. She hadn't just funded Marcus's empire, she had been its secret ruler. Preston Kane received Helena's initial discovery response on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, his confident smirk had vanished. "What the hell is this?" Kane barked into his phone, Marcus on the other end. "Meridian Holdings, Phoenix Capital. Your wife is claiming she's been funding your company through shell corporations," Marcus laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. Those were legitimate investors. I can give you their contact information." "I tried calling them," Kane interrupted. "The numbers are disconnected. The addresses are mail drops. Marcus, if even half of this is real, your wife doesn't want 10 million. She wants the whole damn company." For the first time in years, Marcus Sterling felt genuine fear. The deposition disaster. The conference room at Kane and Associates buzzed with tension as the deposition began. Preston Kane sat at the head of the polished table, his silver hair perfectly styled, radiating the confidence of a predator who had never lost a case. Marcus fidgeted beside him, no longer the composed CEO from the awards ceremony. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights since Helena Cross's revelations. Across from them, Victoria sat with supernatural calm, her hands folded gracefully in her lap. Helena Cross flanked her right side, surrounded by meticulously organized binders that seemed to glow with damning evidence. The court stenographer's fingers hovered over her machine, ready to record what would become the most explosive divorce deposition in Silicon Valley history. "Mrs. Sterling," Kane began, his voice dripping with manufactured sympathy, "I understand this must be difficult for you. 12 years of marriage, and now you're making rather extraordinary claims about your role in your husband's company." "I'm not making claims," Victoria replied evenly. "I'm presenting facts." Kane's smile faltered slightly. "Facts? Yes, well, let's examine these alleged facts. You claim to have invested in Sterling Innovations through various entities. Can you explain how a woman with no business background managed such sophisticated financial maneuvers?" "I graduated magna cum laude from Wharton with a degree in finance," Victoria said. "Before our marriage, I managed a portfolio worth over $200 million. Marcus's head snapped up. In 12 years of marriage, he had never known about her Wharton MBA. He had dismissed her Stanford art history degree as decorative, never bothering to ask about her other qualifications. Kane recovered quickly. "Even so, these shell companies you've created, if they exist at all, represent a level of deception that calls your credibility into question." Helena slid a document across the table. "Meridian Holdings Incorporation papers, filed in Delaware, March 2013. Ultimate beneficial owner, Victoria Sterling through the Sterling Family Trust." Kane examined the document, his confidence visibly shaking. "This proves nothing. Anyone can create a company—" "Bank transfer records," Helena interrupted, sliding another document. $8 million from Meridian Holdings to Sterling Innovations, dated March 15, 2013. Memo line reads, "Server Infrastructure Investment." Marcus stared at the papers, recognition dawning. That was the exact amount he had needed for the data center expansion, the breakthrough that had transformed his struggling startup into a legitimate player. "And this," Victoria said quietly, producing another file, "is the board resolution from Sterling Innovations accepting the investment. Notice the signature on the bottom, Marcus." Marcus looked at his own signature from 9 years ago, remembering how grateful he had been to these mysterious investors who believed in his vision. His hand began to tremble. Kane was losing ground rapidly. "Even if these transactions occurred, they were arm's-length investments. My client had no knowledge." "Phoenix Capital, $15 million, 2015. Helena continued relentlessly. "Apex Ventures, $22 million, 2017. Titanium Holdings, $31 million, 2019. Every major expansion, every technological breakthrough, every success Marcus Sterling claims as his own, funded by Victoria Sterling." The stenographer's fingers flew across her keyboard as Kane's case disintegrated in real time. Marcus felt the room spinning as years of carefully constructed mythology crumbled around him. "But the loan agreements," Kane said desperately. "Surely." "My client maintained operational control." Victoria's laugh was soft and deadly. "Show him the protective covenants, Helena." Helena opened the thickest binder. Every investment came with protective clauses. Meridian Holdings retained veto power over acquisitions exceeding $5 million. Phoenix Capital required approval for any debt financing over $10 million. Apex Ventures held the right to review and reject any senior executive hires. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "I never agreed to that level of oversight." "You did," Victoria said, her voice gentle but implacable. "You signed every document. You were so grateful for the funding, so convinced of your own genius, that you never read the fine print. I protected you from making catastrophic decisions for 12 years, Marcus. Every major choice you thought you made alone was actually subject to my approval." Kane's legendary composure finally cracked. "This is preposterous. You're claiming to have controlled a $3 billion company through a web of shell corporations while pretending to be a housewife?" Victoria's green eyes blazed with quiet fire. I wasn't pretending to be anything, Preston. I was being exactly what Marcus needed me to be, invisible. He couldn't handle the truth that his success was built on his wife's money and judgment, so I gave him the fiction he required. But fiction has a way of becoming expensive. Marcus stared at his wife, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time in years. The woman he had dismissed as decorative, whose intelligence he had overlooked, whose contributions he had minimized, was the architect of everything he had claimed as his own. "I built Sterling Innovations," he said weakly. "You ran it," Victoria corrected. "I built it." Part 5. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Marcus Sterling sat in his studio apartment in Oakland, staring at the newspaper headline that had destroyed his life. Tech wife reveals she built husband's empire. Victoria Sterling, awarded 65% of Sterling Innovations in landmark settlement. The legal battle had been swift and decisive once Helena Cross presented the complete financial audit. $147 million of investments, all traceable to Victoria's family trusts, controlling interests hidden in plain sight. A shadow board of directors that had guided every major decision for over a decade. Preston Kane had tried everything, claiming fraud, arguing statute of limitations, even suggesting Victoria's actions constituted corporate espionage. Judge Catherine Morrison had been unimpressed. "Mr. Kane," she had said during closing arguments, "your client accepted money from entities he never investigated, signed contracts he apparently never read, and built a company on capital he didn't provide. If anyone committed fraud here, it was the fraud of taking credit for another person's work." The final settlement was devastating. Victoria received 65% ownership of Sterling Innovations, the Marin County estate, and controlling interest in all intellectual property developed during the marriage. Marcus kept his 35% stake, worth roughly $1 billion on paper, but functionally worthless since Victoria controlled the board. Within a week of the settlement, Victoria had exercised her majority control. Marcus was removed as CEO, replaced by Dr. Rachel Chen, the company's former CTO, who had always understood the technology better than Marcus ever had. The board voted to buy out Marcus's remaining shares at a severe discount, citing his detrimental impact on company culture and strategic vision. Natasha Vale, who had stood by Marcus throughout the trial, vanished the moment his bank account did. Their passionate affair had apparently been contingent on his billionaire status. She was last seen boarding a plane to Switzerland with a tech executive from Cloud Tech. Marcus's attempts at a comeback had failed spectacularly. No investor would touch him, not because they questioned his technical skills, but because Victoria's revelations had proven he had never actually been the strategic mastermind behind Sterling Innovations' success. Without her silent guidance, he was revealed as merely competent, not visionary. Meanwhile, Victoria emerged from the shadows to claim her rightful place in the tech world. Forbes magazine featured her on its cover with the headline, "The Silent Billionaire: How Victoria Sterling Built an Empire While Playing the Perfect Wife." Under her leadership, Sterling Innovations' stock price soared as investors recognized they finally had a CEO who understood both the technology and the business. In her first interview as CEO, Victoria was asked about the elaborate deception she had maintained for over a decade. "I didn't deceive anyone," she said calmly. "I gave my husband exactly what he said he wanted, the fiction that he was a self-made man. The tragedy is that he preferred the lie to the truth of our partnership. If he had been secure enough to accept my help openly, we would have built something even greater together." When asked about Marcus, her expression softened slightly. "I loved the man he was when we started this journey. But success without humility is a poison that destroys everything it touches." Marcus chose to believe his own mythology rather than face the reality of our collaboration. The tech world buzzed with speculation about what Victoria would do next. Some predicted she would pivot Sterling innovations toward artificial intelligence. Others suggested she might break up the company and start fresh. But those who knew her best understood that Victoria Sterling had spent 12 years learning patience, strategy, and the power of working from the shadows. She had built one empire in secret. Now finally free to work in the light, there was no telling what she might accomplish. As for Marcus, he spent his evenings in that Oakland apartment, scrolling through articles about his former company's success, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he had married with the brilliant strategist who had been pulling the strings all along. He had wanted to be the hero of his own story, but in the end, he had discovered he was merely a supporting character in hers.